Good evening. Welcome to Defacto Review, our weekly in-depth analysis on the current news and affairs with our commentator and economist, Mr. Jargal Defacto.
Good evening.
And I'm your host, Namsar Singh. You can join in on our conversation on MNB World Facebook page and on Twitter with hashtag Jargal_Defacto. Now let's take a look at the topics for today. President's plan to postpone the election. This week's update on COVID-19 and what was left after the Vision 2050. Now let's look at our first topic for today. The spring session of the Parliament started on April 6th, and during the opening of the session, the President of Mongolia highlighted that Parliament needs to take 5 measures against COVID-19. The measure that has been most hotly debated is the postponing the parliamentary election, which is scheduled to take place on June 24th. Our first question about this is that why is the president is trying to postpone the election time after time? He's proposing it almost third time now.
Yeah, he did it twice. He suggested to postpone the election. But the actual decision is to be made by the Parliament. What happened was on April 6th, it was the grand opening of the spring sessions of the Parliament, which is actually the last sessions before the election. And it was done, how they said, in a digital environment. In some 5-6 halls, they were seated separately, keeping a distance in between themselves, having the mask, and then they hold the general screen. They were uniting them, and the president made the speech there as a tradition, and he is suggested 5 points issues, measurements to take soon by the Parliament and by the government. And in fact, this is the second time, as I said, on March 24th, some 10 days or more earlier, he suggested also 6 points. But this time 5 points. The 6 was about the concentration of power in one hand at this time of difficult time, he said, 10 days earlier. And otherwise, the points are the same, except the last one about this concentration of power in one hand was given a little bit in a softer way, that because it's a proven tools to have efficient decisions at the time of difficulty. That was his point, and the main point here of his one is appeal, the other is speech, of the same 5 points. The main thing was to postpone the election because it's a hard time, etc., etc. And also he brought more argument to that suggestion of postponing election, like, for example, because the election organized now, it will have more chance for people to get together, concentration of people in the many places because the political campaign. Second, it is more probably we will not have enough turn of voters enough turn in. The third, because there will be no international observers, nobody is flying obviously, and then there may be a case where the people will question the legitimacy of the election, which may bring to the situation we had in after election in 2008, where 5 people killed. So that was his argument of postponing that election.
So is there any political reason behind this? Because some people are saying that the current party will have much more higher chance to be re-elected if the election is not postponed.
Indeed, because the current cabinet of Hurusuk is doing a good job in terms of combating the spread of coronavirus. Mongolia so far have only a few cases, all brought from abroad, and the government is controlling the situation well, And it is kind of a referendum of what the government is doing currently in this situation. And that's why if it is done on time, like Korea did, by the way, last 2 days, they made also a parliamentary election during this corona virus, where, by the way, Korea was hit stronger, more wider, stronger by this virus, and this current government is doing good. So probably that's the scenario if we have on time this election. Otherwise, if we postpone, the reason will be more problem caused by this coronavirus, probably more infected people, maybe deaths, etc. Then this will be only postponed. And by that time already, if postponed, it will be already a stronger economic effect of this coronavirus, which will give less chance, of course, for the current political party, People's Party, to have the same amount of votes that they would expect if it is done on time.
So how would postponing the election actually affect the political parties? Will there be any less? Or?
Well, first of all, I think because the election is a big deal in this country, and it is a lot, say now 15 political parties, 4 coalitions coming to the elections. If say it's a larger constituency now, where the most known people to ordinary people will have a more chance to win. It means more costs to get you known by the people. So probably around 400. It's very modest estimation. Around 400 million tugrik will be spent by each candidate. If the current 2 large political parties put 76 the seats amount of the parliament candidates, then each of them spend around will end up with minimum of 40 billion tugrik each as a political party. If the other political parties, then altogether we talk about over 420 billion tugriks expenses for this election, which the money can be used in case of coronavirus more spread. Then this money can be used now rather than later, say 3 months or so after the election. And plus, by the way, once postponed election, then it could be not only 3 months as we would expect, but probably a year or so. So that will be a little bit more than less political uncertainty in the country. First. Secondly, all this election will depend on, again, the coronavirus situations, and we have already lost 10,000 jobs according to the Chamber of Commerce estimation and the surveys. The President was quoting that, 10,000 jobs, it's around 40,000 people affected. And if we lose more jobs, then it will be very already serious pressure on the economy, where we have a less supply and demand curves. So it will be postponement of the election will impact anyway on the economy, on the people, on the voters, on everybody, because it will be postponed only in the case of worsening economic situations. So that's what it's about.
So do you think that, how do you think it will affect the citizens and voters? And if it is not postponed, do you think that enough people will vote?
Yes, because well, even in the case of, by the way, the president put on his website certain survey, whether would you like to be a part of survey. One is saying that would you go to election if its election is now organized on time, meaning that June 24th. And those who have answered the questions, half of them said yes, they would come. So it already means that it's minimum. I think the turning in is already there. And plus also the case of Korea shows that they turned out more voters than if it was organized in ordinary circumstances.
So if it's postponed, how would it affect the citizens?
Well, if it is postponed, it's already postponed. It will be postponed because already bad economic situations and bad situation with coronaviruses, and by that time we will be losing already not only 10,000 jobs now. That probably that time will be already 40 or so. So postponement will be also impact seriously on citizens.
Okay, so thank you for that. Now let's get into our second topic. As of today, Mongolia has 16 confirmed cases of COVID-19, all of which were imported, and 4 of them has recovered so far. And Speaker of Parliament Zandajatar presented 10 measures to prevent a community outbreak in Mongolia. Our first question about this one is what key decisions were made by the government during last week's sessions?
Yeah, it was the speaker who announced 10 measurements to be made, because some of them will require new law, like there will be a law in case of law about the pandemic urgency. It is special law, and he has suggested some 10 measures to combat the situation. And out of which I would like to quote a couple of them, explain a couple of them. One, for example, they will reconsider the situation, the state of prisoners in the country, because the conditions, it will be very hard to prevent the further spread of coronavirus among prisoners. The speaker, the parliament is suggesting to pardoning, the law that is pardoning many lower degree penalty prisoners, punishment prisoners, if I may say so. Then it means many prisoners will be freed once. That's one. Secondly, what the speaker suggests is kind of a completely very broad range kind of a banking sector reform, and now the politicians suggest that they will decrease the interest rate, a particular saving rate, then credit rate, which actually don't depend on politicians. It is suggested by the market. However, what they are suggesting is we have 15 commercial banks in Mongolia, except one Hasbank, which has some more than 10 stakeholders. Other banks has either 1 or 2. So the new law will require banks one owner have not more than 20%, which means minimum 5 owners to be on the ownership of the bank, which actually can be done only by normal IPO or etc. This kind of through capital market system, and because also there is a requirement of increasing own equity capital of commercial banks. Some of them are not meeting that requirements, so maybe it is a matter of injecting by other individuals other money, which increases the equity capital. Most probably they have in mind the state is to intervene into that. The state will own more, they will inject money into the equity capital of the bank, and then they need to go to open capital market to sell owners that cannot be more than 20%. So this is one. Secondly, another measurement is in that way, once you increase equity of the bank, they suggest that they think that the credit rate and saving rate is to be down, because there will be more control, more digital system, etc., etc. So that's interesting proposal at this time. Another one is about mortgage loan. In Mongolian, if you take a Mongolian banking asset, then half of them loan, inside of the loan, half of them are consumer's loan, half of them are business loan. And out of the consumer loan, 40% are mortgage loan, special 8% interest rate. And that payment of mortgage, principal payment and interest payment will be postponed for another rescheduled for 6 months, which will give serious income to the family on expenses per family during this economic downturn. And so this kind of measurements he suggested, and many of them probably will take quite longer time to have a impact on the economy, and nothing to say about whether they can do or not for the last 2 months before election approve that law.
So despite all these decisions being made by the government, reports presented by the National Statistics Committee about the situation in March did not really look pleasant. So how and when will these decisions really take effect, and maybe, do they actually succeed in what they're trying to do by reducing the impact of COVID-19 on the economy?
Yeah, we talk about the National Statistics Committee report for first quarter of this year, and it is really not so very well. Our export had decreased year-on-year base by 41%, which is substantial decrease of export, substantial decrease of currency income to the economy, which may impact on the U.S. dollar, foreign currency, and Mongolian tugriks rate, but also because also import had decreased as well. Hopefully there will be more or less balance in terms of the rate. The also statistics say that the loan portfolio that was not paid on time had increased by 25%, which is a substantial deterioration of the quality of a loan, which, by the way, have now that because the government made decisions that they cannot, the many loans will be postponed for 6 months, will not be categorized in different bracket of for creating a fund against possible loss of loan. So that's one reason why this one have increased. But that doesn't mean that the banking sector is becoming more healthier, of course, and that's the statistics what says. The other statistics, which is a very warning some, is the family or violence in the family.
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence, yeah, how to say domestic violence have increased 60% year-on-year base, and this is unacceptable increase, and it means that many people have no. We talked about 10,000 jobs lost, and many people have less jobs, and maybe more drink, and then domestic violence is increasing, and it's something that all societies to pay attention and to work some homework together to change this culture. So this kind of statistics report we have seen. Also, the central bank governor said now 65,000 citizens have a loan, mortgage loan, which is the homes are kept as a collateral by MIK, Mongolian Hypothec Corporation or Mortgage Corporation. So the central bank talked to that organization. They have agreed a payment of postponing payment of the mortgage for 6 months, and also the central bank governor said that we have now 5 trillion tugriks in cash or in liquid assets which is a good amount of money to support the bank further extension.
So you mentioned that we need new laws to actually make some of the decisions work. So Mongolian government were not really prepared for any pandemic because there has been a pandemic named SARS just 2 decades ago. So did the government do anything about it after it was solved?
Well, nobody was prepared for COVID-19. If we have learned something from the previous cases, it was a way bigger and different and much closer to us. Of course, that's what the government trying. We hope it has a certain result now because we don't have much that virus infection. However, we still need to learn more. If this pandemic is becoming unmanageable, then this country has a lot. Like we lack a lot medical required equipments, PPE, and maybe even beds. All this ventilators, not enough. So we still need to learn more. And I think this law you are quoting or you are referring to, pandemic case law, will more institutionalize what the government is doing in the current situation. And in a further case, probably another 10 years or so, if other kind of viruses are coming, then the country will be more ready as institutions, public institutions, economic, political, etc.
Thank you for that. Now let's get into our third topic. The government of Mongolia developed a long-term development plan, Vision 2050, and submitted it to the parliament. These 3-stage development plans were made for each decade through 2050, and goals were set in 9 main categories. So our first question is that what kind of plans were included in this Vision 2050 long-term policy document?
Well, I have been studying this Vision 2050, which became public maybe 3-4 months ago. And people, those who are interested were studying, learning, and there was some public discussions about that here and there, but not very much widespread because this coronavirus is there. However, this document is a very important document. It describes our future vision in 10, 20, 30 years. Many countries do, they have own vision. Mongolia had one at the beginning of this century, and that one is finished this year. So they have it's a good work done and a good description where we want to reach. But however, there is not very clear estimates, provisions, how to get there. Who will do that? This is a market economy, free market economy. It must be. Yet, we don't know clearly. It should be the private sector who will do that, implement that actually, which is not clearly specified. First, secondly, not to write to say how to get those goals. We must have already the clear analysis of what is achieved, what is done, and what is not done, and why. And that's why we have been preparing a critique of each category. And the categories, for example, zone development, regional development of Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar and satellite cities, the middle class or human development, etc. 9 very important categories we have. And last week the parliament had at the first session have agreed by votes that they will discuss this Vision 2050, and the state permanent committee, state structure permanent committee, is going to present as a document to the parliament soon. But however, we need more discussions among people about that vision, because I don't think, because of coronavirus plus and other things, and I don't think it is a whole country, in particular rural, urban, rural areas have been discussing it.
So let's assume that it will be approved. So will the next government, will the next party in power actually implement this?
Good questions. What makes obligatory that concept? Because if it is approved as a law, and then it has to be implemented by whoever is related to that implementation. However, it was not the case of the previous one, and for the last 20 years, it has not reached that goal they have put. For example, it was a matter of regional development issue, for example, and which was not implemented at all. As a result, now half of the economy, half of the population is living in only this capital city, and we have a big migration to these cities from rural areas. Then from Ulaanbaatar, we need a lot of immigration abroad. That shows that we haven't achieved the previous goal. For example, as I said, we in Defacto Institute is doing the critical analysis of each category. Let's say, for example, let's have the middle class category. Middle class in Mongolia is kind of not increasing. It keeps staying at the 60-70% level. The third of the country is poor. Only a few 5% is wealthy, and and people are running for good jobs. We have almost 50,000 people in South Korea. Many people in other countries, but due to this virus situation, somehow they're coming back, and the income level is completely different, and it's more kind of separation of classes coming very seriously, and we don't see, because, for example, we don't rationally use our mining and mineral income like, say, more or less Chile or other mining concentrated economy countries. And so we need a lot to change, in particular our management, and the biggest thing stopping us to implement our plan is corruption, for example. And it keeps going on. By corruption index, we keep going up, back and back out of all countries. And the tragic thing is, we talk a lot, the court system works in such a way that nobody is punished. No money came back from that corrupt money to the economy back. In just 2019, according to the Anti-Corruption Agency, some 12 trillion, which is almost the equivalent of our budget money, where the worth asset was stolen or taken by corruption. So it shows that we have a lot to do to improve governance in the country, to make more transparent, more accountable, and those who misused public funds, assets, they should be punished. And yet nobody is almost punished by that category. So a lot of things to do to change.
Okay, thank you for that. And although we had more questions, unfortunately our time has ended. So we will see you next week with more topics.
Thank
Have
you
a
very
nice
much.
evening. Goodbye.